I'm hoping to be able to articulate this. Normally when I try to verbalize it, the thoughts are gone. But basically, what's happening as I'm here in meditation state, I can tell, that's what it was. I can tell that my brain is at war, and there's like different thoughts and different conclusions about things and different perspectives and priorities and, the things that make a mind, all those things, but a variety of them, and they were not in agreement with one another. And so, yeah, and like when I'm just like sitting and stuff, my head head, upper body, maybe slightly, but mostly my head wobbles back and forth. But I was trying to piece together like the things I was noticing in my brain and make sense of why all the things were so difficult externally. They seem so random and unrelated, and I'm like, they have to align somehow, because I notice the intensity of things inside correlates with the intensity of difficulty outside. The connection doesn't make sense, and it needs to. For me, it needs to, it has to. So, observing it, and then I remember there was this point where I was onto something, like I was finally figuring something out about what was happening in my brain. But I could feel my ability to think start to leave, and my eyes get heavy, like they really needed to blink and I didn't want to. And I could tell that I was losing consciousness. And I made a mental note to my subconscious parts and said, even if you can't remember the specifics of this information, because I know that's conscious declarative, left brain access sort of memory ability stuff, at least remember that there was this experience of getting to a point where you were like figuring things out, but then you started to feel like you were losing consciousness and losing the ability to think and choose when your eyes were opening and where we were looking and stuff. And so it happened, and I closed my eyes, and it was literally just a long blink. Like, that's how my brain explained it to myself. It didn't feel like losing consciousness to my consciousness. And I think that's part of DID, is that there's something going on in the brain, and part of developing alternate states of consciousness is the brain's brilliant ability to cope with that. And so, yes, it started with childhood trauma, but after that it took on this neurodevelopmental aspect, and from there, I believe, the consciousness evolved. And like, I was watching something today on TED Talks where he was explaining that, like, if you look in a mirror and you're looking in the mirror at your left eye, and then you look to your right eye, and then you look back at your left, you cannot see your eyes moving. And that's because there's this moment where you're blind, but your brain fills in the information, because it's really good at like predicting and explaining and like, using that to optimally survive, which includes coping. And so if the brain is randomly losing consciousness because of like seizures in the brain, or because of like God knows what else is going on in there that nobody is researching scientifically in depth yet. I think there's some. I think this is like the time of history where it begins. But yeah, and then the whole concept of having different parts of consciousness is that the brain doesn't have to worry about the seizures, or worry about fainting, or worry about like all of these things, because the consciousness can keep functioning. It can just like hop around to whatever part of consciousness is able to handle the specifics of whatever's happening in the brain and the body at that moment. Like, there's this whole aspect that, I mean, as far as I know, people aren't exploring. Like, maybe I'm missing the information about the research happening right now, but as far as I know, no one's researching this stuff and like diving into this. And what is known is that there are like things like the temporal lobe epilepsy and stuff like that with neurodevelopmental struggles of early childhood trauma. And the symptoms can manifest as other things, and it's really hard to diagnose. And so there could be all sorts of people like me walking around out there having seizures in their brain all the time. And because of the brain's brilliant ability to cope, we don't even know that it's like something that bad. We think it's just like us being emotional and us being this and us being that. Like, it lists all the things that it can manifest as, and it's all the things that can normally be diagnosed as like psychiatric problems and like mental and behavioral health issues. And so there has to be something to this, because there's no way I can be this smart and still be getting into this level of difficulty with such basic stuff. There absolutely has to be something else going on to make sense of this, because I can be chasing my hopes and dreams one day, and the next day I can't read, I can't write, I can barely lift my head, I wish I was dead, I this, I that, I'm not able to be in the present in any capacity. Like, there's got to be something else going on, otherwise there isn't any hope.